Hello, everyone. Welcome to our very first Access Perspectives coffee chat. My name is Megan Marks, and I'm the Senior Manager of Research at Ability Center. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the land on which Ability Center is located. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. We are thankful to be welcomed on these lands in friendship. The lands we are situated on are covered under the Williams Treaty and the traditional territories of the Mississauga, a branch of the Greater Anishinaabe Nation, including Algonquin, Ojibwe, and Odawa. These lands remain home to a number of Indigenous nations and people. We acknowledge these lands out of respect for the Indigenous nations who have cared for Turtle Island from before the arrival of settler people until this day. More importantly, we remember the history of these lands as it has been tainted by poor treatment and the lack of friendship with the First Nations who call them home. Today, we recognize and respect their enduring connection to this land and their contribution to society. As we come together for this important conversation, we also reflect on a shared responsibility to foster a culture of respect, inclusivity, and equity, in all that we do. So I will be one of the moderators today for our first Access Perspectives coffee chat. And joining me is my colleague and co-moderator is Marta Swiridowicz. Oh, I'm sorry, Marta.
You got it, Megan. You got it. Thank you, Megan. Hi, everyone. I'm Marta, Senior Coordinator of Training and Education here at the Ability Center. We're so thrilled to have you join us as we celebrate the International Day of Persons with Disabilities and dive into today's conversation about amplifying the leadership of persons with disabilities for a more inclusive and a more sustainable future.
Exactly, Marta. And this conversation is part of a newly launched series, Access Perspectives, which brings together change makers, leaders, and individuals with lived experience to discuss the next steps needed to build a truly barrier-free Canada. Today, we are honored to have two incredible guests with us who are leading this movement in their own ways. Let's dive right into introducing our panelists.
Yeah, our first guest is Rick Waters. He manager of peer support at Spinal Cord Injury Ontario and accessibility professional assessor of the built environment. I'm very thrilled to have worked with Rick in the past on a few occasions, so I'm thrilled to have him here. Rick has been at the forefront of accessibility initiatives and is very passionate about creating spaces that work for everyone. So, Rick, if you don't mind introducing yourself and tell us a bit about your journey.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Marta. Um, uh, my name's Rick Waters. My journey started over 46 years ago. When I was 16, I had a diving accident, and I damaged my spinal cord as a result. At the time, I was considered what they call a complete injury, which means that I wasn't expected to get function back from about the
Mhm.
shoulders down. But fortunately for myself, I did start to get some function back, and I was re-diagnosed as a an incomplete quadriplegic, which just means that I don't have full paralysis in all my limbs. And I tell you this because my journey includes being an ambulator earlier in my disability days. I had when I was quite young, between maybe 16 or say 17 to 40, I was able to get myself onto forearm crutches and ambulate. And my experience with the world was that of a person who ambulated with crutches, but also used a manual wheelchair a significant amount of time. So I have that perspective of what it's like to be a crutch walker, to be a person who uses a manual wheelchair. But later in life, as I've aged with my disability, I have had several falls using my crutches, and with a fall, it it can turn into a shoulder dislocation or torn muscles, and that's what was happening with me. And frequently enough that I was starting to lose the use of my arms, so I had to make some changes. So now I'm primarily a power wheelchair user. So I now have a lot, for the past, say, 20 years, I've been using a power wheelchair more often than anything else, and so it's been a different way of experiencing my environment, and different challenges. So that lived experience over 46 years has turned out to be, one of the biggest assets, for me, to become an accessibility and disability specialist. And in early in my work career, I wasn't working in anything related to disability or
Mhm.
accessibility, other than, any workplace that I went to. I worked with them to modify the environment so that I could function, and others with disabilities could function as well. So I kind of got my feet wet a little bit in my early careers, but it wasn't until about 2014 that I started working as a consultant for accessibility, and I got requested to be involved in a couple of large projects, which kind of launched me into the
Yeah.
field. And after that, I wanted to get some kind of credential in the field, so I took the Rick Hansen Foundation Accessibility Certification Program. So I went through that, did the schooling. I really loved it because it's all about universal accessibility. So it's
Yep.
all inclusive of, you know all types of disabilities. So my perspective was very much that of a person with a physical disability, and I was my perspective included, the mobility challenge, the flexibility, dealing with pain, dealing with limited hand function. So that all made up my experience with my physical environment. So I'm happy to report that I've been thriving in the built environment. I've had been involved in many projects, and I still am. But I've also found another calling, and that is to help people more on a more, I guess, a more personal way. So I joined the Spinal Cord Injury Association of Ontario just about over 3 years ago, and I'm currently in the position of manager of the peer support program. And I just love working with people and helping them through their journey. So a lot of my job involves managing a team of people that are mentoring people who are newly injured
Yeah.
and are just early on in their journey, and learning what it is to cope with their own disability, and how to, and we show them through our own lived experience that there is hope out there for them, and that there is a life after, a traumatic incident that can lead to disability. So that's where I'm at now. I'm kind of in a dual role of peer manager for spinal cord injury, plus I'm out there doing built environment audits as well.
Great. Thank you,
Yeah.
Rick. What really resonated with me is when talked about that universal aspect of the built environment, as not just for people with disabilities, physical disabilities, but for everyone, able-bodied, as well as neurodiverse and so forth. So thank you for that.
Yep,
Yeah.
my
Yeah,
pleasure.
thank you for sharing the expansiveness of your careers, which is amazing, and also the like you mentioned, you're able to approach situations with very lived experience that you can bring forward, which I think obviously you mentioned is very helpful for your current role in peer support. So thank you for being here today. And I'd like to introduce our next guest, Sarah Moore, who is an advocate for inclusion and accessibility. And Sarah has worked extensively to address barriers and empower diverse communities. So, Sarah, would you be able to share a little bit about your story with us?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be part of our first session here today and to follow such a tough act like Rick. So great to have you joining me on the panel today. My journey towards inclusion is primarily professionally based. I've been a municipal employee for over 17 years now, and a lot of my work has been advocacy and working alongside our Municipal Accessibility Advisory Committee. But my interest in inclusion started way before that, in regards to a role I played in my high school days as a peer supporter during lunch hours. I was assisting individuals with special needs in our exceptional student classroom there. And my interest in inclusion grew from that, and also in relation to how I had several family members and friends who were affected by disability, but also invisible disabilities as well, which had a significant other perspective than those that maybe had a visible identifier to somebody who had a disability. So the focus on invisible has become of interest to me through my career as well. I feel like I'm tripping all over my words here.
Oh,
So
not at
No, you're
all.
doing great.
Yeah, I would
it's
not
very
really
daunting.
notice.
Okay. So once I joined the municipal world, I also found that there were other avenues to support advocacy because within a municipal world, there's quite a structure towards the support that we
Yeah.
can provide and often has limitations within the system itself. So, on the personal perspective of that, I sought other opportunities to be an advocate within the community, and I joined the CMHA, Canadian Mental Health Association Board of Directors, as mental health is something that touches my family quite closely. And those with mental health challenges often face a lot of stigma within the community, being something that's often an invisible factor to a person's life. So the work that I've done is really contributed to my work that I've had experienced with our Accessibility Advisory Committee members, individuals from our community that are self-identifying with having lived
Yeah.
experiences and bringing them to the table to make sure that we're amplifying voices within our own immediate backyard to make a difference within the community in which that they live.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I think we have an amazing panel today to um, chat about International Day of Persons with Disabilities. And I'm so excited that I get to be here chatting with all of you. And for everyone who's watching, thanks for joining. I think maybe to get us started, and probably it has some of it has already come out from your introductions, but just getting and I are hoping that you guys can share, we can all share what that international, well, now I'm tripping over my words. What does International Day of Persons with Disability mean to you? And I open up the floor. So whoever feels like they would like to share first.
Sure, I don't mind jumping in. So for me, December 3rd has been recognized for over 30 years now, for those of you who didn't know, by the United Nations. And
Hmm.
it's not just a singular day of importance, it's a platform to elevate a conversation that is important all year round. And we say that with a
I
lot
love
of
that.
those recognition days related to disability and inclusion, National Accessibility Week, things of that nature. It's one day, but this is an important conversation that needs to have space held for it all year round. So, with recognition on December 3rd, it's great to have that one day to sort of boost that recognition and celebration. But it's also that opportunity to sort of call attention to a days of action and the importance of having those conversations within our communities when they're not regularly taking place. It's also an
Mhm.
opportunity for us to personally reflect where our role is and our capacity and knowledge is to support individuals with disabilities within our communities. And it's a great way to sort of celebrate the great work that's being undertaken by community organizations such as Ability Center or individuals within our local communities such as Rick and the great leadership and stewardship that they have demonstrated to highlight the change-making roles that they have taken within our communities.
Yeah, Sarah, what you just said about about the International Day for People with Disabilities, I love that you said it's not, let's not just leave it as today, right? December 3rd. Let's continue that conversation moving forward, right? Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think to add, Sarah, I think you've said it all basically. So you did a great job at kind of framing what the day is all about, and also the context. And for me, it ties into the whole where we are as a society right now. We still very much live in an ableist world. We still struggle, people with disabilities, to have equal access and to have equal rights. So there is a long way to go, um, uh, and it's also important to recognize how far we've come, and the people that have gone before us that have really been the trailblazers in laying down the foundation for getting us this far. So and I'm really motivated by what I see with people starting to take on more leadership roles
Yeah.
in the disability community. I was quite disheartened years ago when I used to go to a lot of committee meetings, and I was just getting into the field of accessibility. And I was in a lot of the meetings, I was the only one with the disability in the room.
Yeah.
So it really demonstrated to me that we didn't have enough of a voice out there, and we didn't have enough leaders out there that were taking on those roles. So I'm really pleased that now when I go to meetings and I go to inclusivity events, I see more involvement from people with disabilities and more representation. I hear more voices speaking up, and I see people in leadership roles. And I love the theme of
Yeah.
this topic, to amplify the voices, amplify the leadership, because the whole connotation of that is that there already are people in these leadership roles, but let's amplify that. And that's exactly what we need to do, because still, when I go to meetings, it's only me and maybe a couple of other people with disabilities talking about disability and accessibility. So it is it is very like I said, there is still a long way to go, but there's some great things happening already.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you both sort of brought forward the I actually love how you just said it, Rick, amplifying voices, and the leaders that are currently leading and that are coming up and building their capacity and skill sets to become those leaders in the future. And I think that Sarah and Marcia talked about having today be a day that we can make sure that we amplify those voices more, but that it doesn't just end today, and that we continue these conversations. And it's a year-round constant conversation, and that we're constantly trying to make sure we amplify those voices. So we're reaching out to individuals with lived experience and listening and taking the time to actually listen, and really hear what those individuals are asking for, looking for, experiencing, so that we can build this more inclusive and barrier-free Canada. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly, Megan. So just everything with all of that said, this year's theme, as Rick mentioned, from the United Nations is amplifying that leadership of persons with disabilities for a more inclusive and sustainable future. So how, and maybe we did talk about some of these things, but how do you find this resonates with you personally, both you, Sarah and Rick, and within your organizations?
Rick, did you want to start or do you want me to take this one?
You go ahead, Sarah, and I'll jump in right after.
Sure. So I think it resonates with me on a couple of different levels. I think as a municipal sector employee, we have a focus and a commitment to accessibility and inclusion for our community. Within the town of Ajax, we have our mission inclusion multi-year accessibility plan. And amplifying leadership of persons with disabilities is one step forward to achieving that community inclusivity. So making sure that when we are developing our policies, that we are looking at our employment practices, our community engagement exercises, that accessibility is a layer that's been aligned with all of those pillars in what we do as a municipal partner. And I think personally, just as Rick had mentioned before, it's an opportunity. Those individuals are already out there doing great work in our community, but the voices aren't necessarily heard as loudly as others. So
Yeah.
this is a theme to really help uplift and amplify the great work that is being undertaken to date in our communities all across the country and really take notice and be mindful of how we can support those individuals.
Yeah. How
Terrific.
about you,
Thank you,
Rick?
Sarah.
Yeah.
And I guess from my perspective, it really resonates with me personally. I did when I started out with Spinal Cord Injury Ontario. I started as a peer coordinator, part time, and I was doing my building audits as well. So I had kind of a balance going on, and then the opportunity came up for me to take a leadership role and manage the department. So that I was so grateful to have that opportunity.
Mhm.
And the opportunity came about partly because I was in the role already and I knew the job, but also there was a desire to have a person with lived experience in the role. And that's something I'm seeing more of,
Yep.
which is a really empowering thing. When I started out, I was almost had to shake my head like, is this real? Like my lived experience seems to be my biggest superpower. Whether it's doing my
Love it.
built environment job or working for spinal cord injury, it is that's what I'm requested to give to others is my lived experience and my experience navigating the world. So that to me is really empowering, and I think that that really does resonate well with getting more people into leadership roles with disabilities, with the lived experience, so that they can share that experience with whatever field they're in. Um, there's and lived experience I've learned too is it's not just the person with a disability, but as Sarah mentioned earlier, she's had a very fruitful career in this field and has learned a lot. Plus, she has family members, and at spinal cord injury, for instance, we have our program encompasses family members, primary caregivers for people with disabilities as well. So we try to engage as much of the extended community as well, because those voices are very important as well because they tell another aspect of the journey that people are going through, and which includes themselves. So I tend to look uh, at disability and inclusion, that goes beyond just people with disabilities, but it
Yeah.
involves all of society, and it should involve all of us, because eventually I hope that we will get to the point where it isn't such an us and them scenario, where it's not the group of people with disabilities and the people who are able-bodied, but we're just all seen as people,
Yeah.
and I think that's where we should be headed as a society.
Yeah. That's such a powerful statement. We're just people.
Yep.
Yeah.
And let's hear all of our voices and let's make it so that everyone has a voice. And
Yeah.
yeah, such a powerful statement, and some really key points around excuse me, around lived experience, and broadening our understanding of what encompasses lived experience. And that's really wonderful to have that caregiver aspect as well for the Spinal Cord Ontario. And I think one of the interesting things that the UN has done is put also, excuse me, in on top of the theme that they outlined, they put out some calls to action, or key goals that us as individuals, organizations, and community partners can work towards, promoting leadership, ensuring inclusion, ensuring participation, increasing the awareness of rights, and celebrating achievements. And I think that, like, from my experience working at Ability Center, that time of listening and connecting with individuals of the lived experience is so important to understand the next steps we take to reach or work towards reaching these goals and call to actions. But I'm also really interested in hearing both of your thoughts, and Marta's as well, on these key goals and call to actions, and how we as individuals or our organizations can work to make steps towards getting towards these goals.
Sure. So I think one of the first key pieces we need to recognize along this journey is that it's not a journey that anybody can travel alone. A
Mhm.
key piece to success in really making sure that the calls to action can be actioned, I feel personally and professionally, is collaboration. And it's something that we've been able to explore a lot within our organization, reaching out to community partners. Often we don't know what we don't know, especially if we're coming from an able-bodied community. And
Yeah.
like Rick had mentioned, the importance of having that lived experience and those subject matter experts within our community that are serving the disability community, supporting the disability community, or sharing their own lived experience in a leadership capacity or a volunteer capacity with us as a municipality is a real win-win scenario for us, because it's bringing a valuable perspective that we might not have within the structures and the systems that we have as a municipality, but really branching out to the community and working with organizations like Ability Center. And there's so many more, community living. We could go on forever. But I feel that that's a really strong piece to be able to action some of these calls to action. And of course, the education and awareness piece. Again, going back to you don't know what you don't know. So elevating opportunities where we can be sharing stories, where we can be sharing personal experiences, where we can be sharing teachings and learnings that are transferable, regardless of what sector or where you're coming from within our community, all have key takeaways for us as individuals as we all travel along that path together. As you guys
Yeah,
had
having
said,
these
we're all
conversations.
people, right? Just
Yeah,
conversations like today, they're
yeah.
all
Yeah.
catalysts for moving those actions forward.
Mhm.
That's right. I love what you said about that collaboration piece. As soon as there's a project that we start, I don't want to start it without somebody that actually is living it, right?
Right.
Living, so whether we're doing a facility audit or we're doing any type of, training, I want to ask those people that actually with those lived experience. I mean, that project is not going to be fulfilled if those individuals are not consulted. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Rick?
Yeah. So definitely that there I think the calls to action to like really um build on that amplifying the voices of people with disabilities, and also to people who work in the field of accessibility and disability. And I think the calls to action for leadership. For us, for me and my career background, it's been very much uh, I've received a lot of support along the way. So I don't, to Sarah's point earlier, with collaboration, I don't think I would have gotten anywhere near where I have without collaborating with others, and also with others helping me to amplify my own leadership role. So I didn't get into where I am by myself. I did it with the help of many other people, and also there's people that were in a similar role to mine and are still in roles like mine that have gone before me and have really set the stage. So um, now I feel like I'm in a position where I need to amplify that leadership role. And things like this, these interactions and these coffee chats, they really motivate me to refocus and not take my roles that I play in society in a leadership capacity, not to take them for granted, or to uh, or to fall into the belief that I've reached the pinnacle of my career, and I can now just kind of drift through the rest of my career as a person with a disability. But really, it the way that things have evolved for me is that I've realized that I have to learn a lot more than I know, and that's been the case with each stage of my progress as a professional with a disability. I knew very little about uh, uh, people with going through with other types of disabilities, like um, people with neurodiverse disabilities, people with sensory disabilities. I had to learn from people, and I have colleagues that I work with so that they give me their perspective. They share that with me so that I can incorporate it into my own understanding when I'm out assessing a building or doing a peer consultation. At least I'm getting a much wider perspective than my own lived experience. I'm actually capitalizing on the lived experience of others as well.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting idea that you just mentioned, Rick, around learning. And one of our colleagues had previously used the phrase unlearn and then learn again, and
Yeah.
sort of unlearn those assumptions that you have either grown up with or just occurred because of the situations that you've been in, the society that we live in. And I think it just goes back to listening again, like being an active listener in those conversations with coworkers, with friends, because as we've mentioned a couple times now, lived experience is so diverse for each individual, and taking the new learnings or the learnings that we get from having these conversations, and like you just mentioned, Rick, being able to put those into a practice of within the facility audits or within just everyday conversations that you're having with other people, so you can um, again just try and build out more education for others, and just sort of, yeah, just take that information and and use it in a way that's going to benefit our society.
Yeah, I love that what you said about the unlearning. And sometimes people just don't know, as Sarah Moore said, you don't know what you don't know. But if you just kind of change that language slowly, I think we can have better conversations moving forward. Yeah. All right. So, the next thing that we kind of want to ask is how can others, and by others, I mean individuals, organizations, small or big, and community partners, amplify that leadership of people with disabilities? Also, I know that we've already kind of touched on a lot of things, but is there anything that you both want to add?
Sure. I think, pardon me, any way that you can help to create or participate in platforms like the one we're offering today, where individuals with disabilities, such as Rick, are leading conversations and sharing information about their leadership and their experiences, is a positive for that social shift in
Yeah,
amplifying voices, in terms of inclusive practices, from an organizational perspective, having that self-reflection, carving out space and time and resources to make sure that things such as your employment practices, how your policies are being developed, all have taken into consideration inclusion from various perspectives. In terms of building networks in the community, reach out. Especially if you're looking to learn, community organizations are a vast resource and they're willing to share. They want to share the great information and the great resources that they are within your communities. So they're only going to help support you and your toolkits as we move forward for greater inclusion. And I also think when Rick talked a little bit about earlier about
excuse
making
me.
your way into those leadership roles, we need to make sure that the process to get there and the path to get there is barrier free, right? So really taking a step back to make sure that we don't have systemic barriers, or if we have identified them, that we're breaking them down so that there is a process and a path for individuals to have those opportunities. Looking for role models within your community or mentorship programs where we can have those conversations, be them formally or informally, so that we're having that knowledge and experiential exchange between individuals and just really challenging the system. A lot of the province of Ontario and even across Canada is very legislative based when it comes to accessibility. And we know that that is the bottom of the dugout basement in terms of where we should be for accessibility and inclusion. So advocating to move that needle of expectation even further, and moving beyond that, even without the legislative requirements to do so.
Exactly.
I think those are some great first steps to take.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah.
Definitely, and I think a lot of what I hear, like one of the buzzwords is creating a culture shift, a
Yeah.
culture
Mhm.
of inclusion, and I really believe that that's happening. Although to me not fast enough, but I'm a little bit impatient about this stuff. But really, I've seen a cultural shift over the years, and it's gone from very much where people with disabilities were in the background and not really in the forefront. So in other words, we didn't have a strong voice and we didn't have strong leadership. But over the years, that has developed, and I'm really thrilled to see that, because it's with those cultural shifts, both within our society, but also within organizations, that really become help to become the catalysts of change. Because once you have that cultural and mindset, whether it's in your own organization or with yourself, it does open up a lot of opportunities, and you start to see the abilities of people rather than the disability. And that's I think when the magic starts to happen, is when you stop seeing a person as having a disability,
Yeah.
but seeing them as a person first, and everything else is pretty much in the background.
Yeah. Yeah. Just as you both sort of shared your your thoughts there, just a couple of things stood out to me around how the theme of this year is obviously relevant to our conversation that we're having, but has sort of that amplifying the voices and listening to what they're saying and learning from that and taking that to help build that shift culturally, societal, and just we're humans. Let's look at us as humans. And you're right, Rick. Everything else is just background.
As an add-on,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. And I want to thank both of you so much for joining us and give you the opportunity. I know we're getting close to our time that we have allotted to chat, and so if there was anything else that you wanted to share that has popped into your head or that you maybe we didn't get to in our conversation so far that you were hoping to have a discussion about, I'm very open to offering that floor to you right now.
Sure. Well, I just thank all of you for the opportunity to participate in the chat today. And I know it will be the first of many to come. So I'm excited to hear and listen in on those other voices to be amplified by future sessions. And I think it's not just about providing the opportunities. It's really like what Rick had said, that culture shift and that mindset shift with those societal structures, be it as an individual or within an organization, and ensuring that people with disabilities have those opportunities to participate, but that are also part of that leading and shaping of that shift, right? And it's not just about creating a world where everyone's contributions are valued. It's about having that as it's not just that being the end goal, it's about that being achieved and that becoming an actual reality. So it's great to talk about, like, this is where we want to be,
Yeah.
but we really need to actually see it happen before we know that that change has really made its way forward.
Yeah, and I think your sentence around an end goal, like I think, and you've said this before, we're on a journey, and this is
Mhm.
a journey that we're going to continue to be on because there's constantly going to be ways that we can become more accessible and inclusive in our society for all of the people within our society. So, yeah. Rick, did you have any last minute thoughts you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, actually, just what you've been talking about, Sarah, has kind of prompted something, just something to talk about a little bit further for myself, and that's building resilience in people. So what I found as well, in working with one-on-one with people with disabilities, is quite often people don't have a real proper sense of self-worth. So they
Yeah.
have a very a degraded sense of self-worth, and I think people with disabilities often need to be um, they need some help to elevate themselves and to see the potential. And I think there's many individuals that find their way with the help of others. For me, I've been really blessed with having a wonderfully supportive family, and I have some terrific friends that are there for me when I need them. So I have a great support group myself, and I know that not everybody does. And I think if we are, as a society, more supportive, and we are all doing marching to that to the beat of that drum, then I think that shift will occur, and it has definitely already started. But um, to the point of the theme, it needs to be amplified, and by building on what's already out there and really giving it that push so that it's really it's been magnified. That's one of the great things about the International Day for people with disabilities, because it does shine a light. It's only one day, but it is a day where we can recognize the accomplishments of other people and how far we've come, but also to acknowledge that we still have a long way to go. And even, to be quite frank, the AODA had a very aggressive goal to have all of Ontario um, fully accessible by 2025. Personally, I know that we have a long way to go
Less
still.
than a month away, right?
Bless.
Yes, so we better get busy. Like, what are we doing on this call right now? No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. But basically, we still have a long way to go. But setting that goal in the first place and
Yeah,
working
that's
toward
huge.
achieving it is a huge thing. So I don't like to diminish what's been being done. I do think that a lot more has to be done. And like we've all been talking about, we're on a journey, and uh, it, uh, there may not be an end game in my mind in my lifetime, but I think that the journey itself, if it's a positive one, and we're continuing in the right direction, it will elevate people with disabilities and their opportunities to fulfill leadership roles. So I think just really still like continuing to set aggressive goals, even if they aren't fully realized. If people are working toward those, at least we know that we're going in the right direction. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think a long way to go, but still great accomplishments so far.
Yeah, the more aggressive those goals, the more will be done, and we can inch forward as much as we can. Yeah, so a huge thank you. We have come to almost to the end. A huge thank you to everyone who joined us today. And remember, the conversation doesn't stop here, as we've said it plenty of times here during this during today. Let's just continue to learn and advocate and to build that barrier-free world together.
Yeah, and I think both Rick and Sarah, your sort of wrap up comments um, not sort of highlight how the theme of amplifying um, is so important, and that it's going to help us to continue to work through that journey that we were talking about. So I just want to again reiterate what Marta said. Thank you so much for being on this initial coffee chat with us. I think this was such a wonderful discussion, and I am so thankful that I got to be a part of it with all of you. And I also want to thank everyone who is watching. And we are very grateful that we had time today to hold such an important conversation to mark International Day of Persons with Disabilities. So thank you for being a part of the initial access perspectives. And we look forward to chatting with everyone in the future. So until next time, have
Until
a great
next
day.
time.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Cheers.